Uh, Welcome back. This is Principles of Management at Newberry College in the fall of 2021. This is a re recording of Unit 5. Um, in It's going to be Chapter 5 in the 10th edition of our textbook and Chapter 6 in the 11th edition. They're substantially identical, as most of the book is, and I'll point out any important differences as we go along. The goals, the educational goals for this unit and major topics are the nature and purposes of planning, managers and the strategic management process, learning to compare and contrast approaches to goal setting and planning, and contemporary issues in planning. And this is a very large chapter, and we may have to break it into a couple of units. I try to keep the lectures down under 30 minutes, and this one may be a little bit longer. So as we go along, I'll keep checking the time, and perhaps we'll take a break halfway, or maybe even earlier than that, just so we can cover everything appropriately. Now, I'm often asked, and this was not in the first version of the recording, but I'm often asked, how do you learn about business? If you're new to business, how do you develop the knowledge that you need to have about business? Do you have to get an MBA? Do you have to I mean, how much do you have to study it to enter into business? And I can tell you that there are many people who are very successful in business who have no formal training and who learn, basically through the school of hard knocks. If you want to study it as an academic discipline, certainly an undergraduate degree in business management or perhaps accounting or one of those related fields is helpful. Maybe an MBA. I went to an MBA program at UNC Chapel Hill and received a degree, the MBA degree, while I was getting my law degree at Chapel Hill. And I do have to say that I think that those courses are very helpful in giving some exposure to the tools and techniques of management, and particularly on the quantitative side. But just to maybe streamline the process and get you some free education or relatively free education, maybe inexpensive education, I'd like to suggest a couple of things that you do to fill in the gaps in your education. And one of them that I found particularly helpful, and this has been true for certainly my entire business career, nearly 40 some years, is to be a regular reader of Forbes magazine. And I've had a subscription for many years, and I've always thought that if you were to read Forbes on a regular basis, and I think it comes out maybe every other week during the course of the year. There might be 20, maybe only 24 editions, maybe not quite that many anymore, as print magazines go out of favor. And I have an online subscription to both Forbes and the Wall Street Journal, and I enjoy reading the feature articles. I learn a lot about what people in the business community are doing. But if you can get access perhaps to a library that has a subscription to Forbes, here's the 30 under 30 issue, which of course has multiple cover shots for the different people. That's, I believe, Kevin Durant, the basketball player. These are some guys, I think, from the entertainment community. The cover lady started a tech company. She actually developed an app that competes with Adobe Acrobat and Microsoft. And I've forgotten what this lady does, maybe genetic testing or something like that, and so on and so forth. And this guy with his bad tats, I think, is a rapper and also activist in the immigrant community. But Forbes magazine, I think, is very helpful in understanding the business issues, explaining them well, and you can learn from that. You can learn from what other successful people are doing. Now, the Wall Street Journal, I don't get the print edition anymore, although my father-in-law does, and he always saves the real estate section for me, which is called Mansion. Appropriately enough, this little place in Scotland, I think, is about $4 million, and I like to read the real estate stories because so many of my clients are in the real estate business, and I like to see what people are doing, perhaps to increase value for properties, what the market is like for larger homes, and the development of specialty real estate ventures. So that's my particular interest. But quite frankly, if you had the Wall Street Journal and if you just read the front page feature stories and the editorial page every day, and learn to read the stock and fund pages in the back, and what they mean, uh, that would help tremendously in your understanding of business. So, with that small commercial, unpaid as it is for those two fine publications, let's move on. But again, Unit 5, Chapter 5 in the 10th edition, Chapter 6 in the 11th edition, and it really doesn't matter which of the editions you read, they're substantially the same. But planning is so important, and so this fifth unit really is one that is crucial to the job of a manager. And planning is the primary management function, and your book makes this clear. Uh, it's Planning establishes the basis for all other things that managers do as they organize, lead, and control. And all managers plan. Some do it better than others. Some planning is formal, and some planning is informal. Formal planning is what we're going to focus on for this particular unit. And what it means is defining specific goals covering a specific time period, writing down these goals and making them available to organization members, and three, using these goals to develop specific plans for the organization to achieve them. So that's the type of planning we're going to be talking about. Now, why should managers plan? Well, it's like calling a play in football. It gets the team moving in the right direction at the right time. Uh, you need to direct coordinated effort of all the team members. It reduces uncertainty. It reduces waste and redundancy, and it establishes goals and standards that facilitate control, one of the other important functions of managers. Calling the right play and having each member of the team know his or her responsibility is organizing, and it's also leading. Now, in your book, the first exhibit in the chapter, which is Exhibit 5 1 in the 10th edition, 6 1 in the 11th edition, these provide good reasons for planning and show some of the benefits of planning in a visual sense. It's a nice graphic representation. Reducing waste and redundancy is the very definition of efficiency. And as a manager, you want to be effective in reaching your goals, and you also want to do it as efficiently as possible. Establishing specific goals also creates accountability and accessibility. Metrics and targets are measurable, and they can be used for evaluation the performance of team members and the manager, his or herself. This allows for effective control of the organization. And if you have objections to planning, if you've got team members perhaps who are objecting to planning, there's a Socratic dialogue that is in this part of your book that's worth reading and learning some of those responses, because it has the common critiques of the planning process. Uh, and yes, there's some inclination among some people. You've got some negative Nellies. Uh, who are paralyzed by fear of failure, who say we can't predict the future, so how can we plan for it? Or we need to remain nimble and open to creative ways to address change. So let's not, you know, let's not, have one particular plan. Let's go out there and react to what happens. Well, your book gives you solid responses to these critiques. Certainly, the ability to be quick and responsive and nimble is important, particularly as you're a small organization. But it's sometimes you need to put your boots on and start marching all together in the same direction. And so that's the planning process and really the implementation of the planning process. Okay, managers and the strategic management process. Let's move on and talk about what this means a little further on in the chapter. Strategic management. This is what managers do to develop an organization strategy. What are strategies? Well, strategies are plans for how an organization will do what it's in business to do, how it will compete successfully, and how it will attract its customers in order to achieve its goals. The strategic management process is a 6-step process that encompasses strategy, planning, implementation, and evaluation. And a mission is a statement of an organization's purpose. Now, with respect to mission statements, if you've ever seen the movie Jerry Maguire, you've seen what happens when a personal mission statement doesn't match the organization's culture. We talked about this in the unit on culture, and maybe we'll talk about that again later. Uh, the strategic management process. Now, this is Exhibit 5-2 in the 10th edition, Exhibit 6-2 in the 11th edition. This is a very important diagram, and I would encourage you to study it carefully. It shows the process of analyzing strategic strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, which it abbreviates as SWOT, SWOT. So, analyzing strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and then formulate strategies to minimize weaknesses, take advantage of strengths and opportunities, and deter or overcome threats. And then you implement those strategies, and then you evaluate the results. That's the process. So those 5 steps. Again, I can't emphasize enough how important this diagram and this process is to modern management. In today's management, it's not enough to follow the proven methods of the past. You need to identify threats and opportunities constantly in the changing environment and adapt to those changes if, if you can, given your mission and your culture. Also note Exhibit 5-3 that shows the components of the mission statement. I will post in your resources page the actual 25-page Jerry Maguire mission statement that Cameron Crowe wrote for the movie Jerry Maguire. It's the work of a sports management professional, and I think some of you want to go into sports management. And Jerry Maguire, he was an athlete's agent who had to come to grips with the disconnect between his own values and personal mission and the corporate culture of his sports management firm. He valued a fiduciary approach to his clients. He wanted to spend more time with them and care for them in more aspects of their lives. His company wanted to maximize clients across all groups of athletes and dominate the market. It was a consumer, really a financial approach to clients, not a fiduciary model. And so Jerry Maguire got fired. He had to start his own organization, a very small organization. Although, if you can recruit Renee Zellweger as your first employee, you probably are doing pretty well. Components of a mission statement. So this is Exhibit 5-3 in the 10th, 6-3 in the 11th. It starts with customers. Who are our customers? Who should they be? How can we get them? When I started my law firm, that was one of the first questions we asked. What clients can we take, and what additional clients can we develop? Because you need to have the revenue coming in, or you can't pay the bills. We also established our banking relationships early in that process, and had multiple banks and multiple lines of credit so that we could keep afloat until that revenue stream started. Where do we compete? Which markets? Geographically? What other dimensions? Does geography even matter anymore? These are questions that you have to really take a hard look at yourself and decide which markets you want to compete in. So, concern for survival, growth, and profitability is a key component, and one that ultimately might outweigh even the most important social goals. If you can't survive and thrive, maybe you should do something else. Uh, what's your philosophy? What's your philosophy? This is an important part of a mission statement. What are the basic beliefs, values, and ethical priorities of the organization? Uh, how responsive is the firm to societal and environmental concerns, also known as how much of a how much does a great public image help us to survive and thrive in the market? What are our major products and services? What wedges or niches do we have strategic advantages in? What are our weaknesses? How can we capitalize on our strengths to achieve a better position in the market? This needs to go into your mission statement as well. Are we technologically current? If not, how do we get there? When I started teaching this class, I was not technologically current on Genzabar. I am working on that process every day. Uh, what's our self concept? Does it mean competitive advantages? Does it mean clarity of mission and values? I see self concept as a measure of the strength of the culture of an organization. Is there a concern for employees? The human element. Are our employees happy to come to work in the morning? If not, how can we achieve this most important metric of success? Are there some businesses in which it's impossible to provide employees with a high quality of life? Think about the guys who work on the garbage truck. I've seen some examples of garbage truck teams that had positive attitudes and hustled like the guys in Cool Hand Luke, the prison laborers who were paving the road under Paul Newman's direction, and that's a worthwhile movie to watch. Uh, the citizens complained uh, that the trucks were going home too soon, so this actually happened for some time in Charlotte, North Carolina, and there actually was a controversy that the garbage trucks were going home at noon, uh, and the guys, how come they're not working harder? Well, they had their assigned routes, but the supervisor who had them motivated to work so fast had to tell all the complaining uh, members of the public that their work was done. That's why they were going home. They'd finished their rounds in roughly half of the time estimated based on the past performance of previous teams, and that was even as in a mundane and perhaps what you might think of as soul killing job is working on the garbage truck. With good management, you can get great performance. What strategies do managers use? And the book identifies corporate strategy, competitive strategy, and functional strategies. And the corporate strategies can include a growth strategy, a stability strategy, a renewal strategy at the top corporate level. Competitive strategies for various strategic business units like cost leadership, differentiation, a focus strategy, and also cautions us to watch out for being stuck in the middle with no strategy or some kind of blended strategy that doesn't make any sense anymore. And then a functional strategy is a departmental strategy, and that might be based on organizational design, which we will get into in a future chapter. So pay careful attention to the types and examples of competitive strategies. This is really good stuff. I mean, this is the sort of thing that you read those articles in the Wall Street Journal or in Forbes to see the strategies that other business people have used successfully to compete. And this framework work allows you to emphasize where your organization might find niches that allow you to compete better. So, corporate strategy. Let's talk about that. These a growth strategy. What are the proven ways to grow? Well, there's several of them that the book identifies. One is concentration in our primary line of business, increase the number of products or number of markets served. Um, a few years ago, you saw this in the beer industry, and you continue to see it as with craft beers and some of the larger beverage companies uh, are increasing the number of their offerings with all these wild different types of brews, of different styles, different products, different names, and perhaps setting up different companies to brand brand differentiate. Then you can also have vertical integration, forward or backward. You can move forward in the chain and perhaps if you're a manufacturer, start to acquire some of the vendors who purchase from you. If you're in the distribution business, you might integrate backward and acquire some of your suppliers and that sort of thing. So you can grow in that way. Uh, Maybe get all the way from basic production all the way to the final sale to the customer. Uh, Horizontal integration, you can combine with competitors and to grow in that manner. Uh, Expand your geographic market, perhaps. There has been a trend in many industries. A lot of the uh, trades, construction, and service to construction have grown by going across the country and rolling up a number of small, privately held businesses into a larger coordinated group. Certainly in medical, you've seen Hospital Corporation of America as a good example of a hospital system which grew by acquiring additional hospitals around the country, many times having some major culture shocks as a large corporate hospital system acquired strategic markets, but perhaps were purchasing former religious related hospitals, Catholic hospitals, Presbyterian hospitals, those sorts of things. Perhaps hospitals that were owned by one or two physicians, and certainly a culture shock as they became more corporate. And diversification, moving into new industries. So that's another way to grow is to find another business and to roll that up into the umbrella of some sort of conglomerate. Uh, a stability strategy. So if you're not growing, maybe you just want to, maybe there's a period of uncertainty and you just want to keep your market position. So that's identified as a stability strategy. And then a renewal strategy. Things aren't going that well. The organization is in trouble, and retrenchment is how we refer to relatively tweaking minor problems. Turnaround, and you've heard that there are certainly corporate experts in turnaround businesses, usually, uh, maybe sometimes involving receivership or bankruptcy, more drastic actions. But renewal strategies typically involve cutting costs and restructuring operations and fixing perhaps major competitive problems. So, corporate strategies are generally used by multi-business organizations, big corporations, who are trying to figure out what businesses do we want to be in, and how can we survive and thrive. Competitive strategies. Three competitive strategies in your book. One is cost leadership strategy. The second is differentiation strategy, and the third is a focus strategy. So, competitive strategies are typically adopted at the strategic business unit. That's an important term defined in your book in this material. Level, strategic business unit level for competitive strategies. Functional strategies, which we're probably not going to get into that much, they're typically adopted in the departments of the business: research and development, HR, marketing, finance, manufacturing, that sort of thing. And there's no separate slide for that. It depends on your organizational design, and we'll get into the different types of organizational designs in I think in the next unit. But to use competitive strategies effectively, you have to have a real competitive advantage, some aspect of your business that you do better than your competitors. So, cost leadership strategy, having the lowest cost in the industry, aimed at the broad market, and Walmart, a classic example of that. Differentiation strategies, offering unique products that are widely valued by customers, also aimed at the broad market. Or a focus strategy, which is a cost advantage or differentiation advantage in a narrow segment or niche. Oftentimes, higher end products will have a focus strategy aimed to very affluent clients. So to identify these advantages, you have to be able to identify your organization's core competencies, another important term, and your organization's unique resources. So ask yourself, what do we do well better than others? And what resources do we have that our competitors don't have? So, a few examples. If you're Coca-Cola, you have the secret formula. If you're Disney, you have the world's most loved theme parks, and you have the world's most valuable catalog of classic animated films. If you're Apple, you have unmatched product development and creative innovation. These are differentiation strategies. If you're Walmart, you have cost leadership, as we said. If you're Amazon, you have the world's biggest virtual marketplace and often have cost leadership as well. When I started my little law firm, I was able to identify a very successful focus strategy for my new firm. My approach to drafting wills and trusts for extremely wealthy clients. What I had learned was that the larger law firms that had the same technical expertise that we had in terms of will and trust drafting, estate planning, as it's sometimes called, for very wealthy clients, when they would get a new client in, they would bill by the hour. And, every time the attorney or paralegal or the supervising partner, picks up the file, they charge time. And as they're thinking about the client in the shower in the morning, they're charging time. And many clients were put off by this. They were worried that, I'm a little worried about how much my lawyer's thinking about me because it keeps costing me money and I still don't have my documents. And so what we did is we said, regardless of the size, and let's identify the smaller client, maybe the client who's got less than a couple $1,000,000, and the medium-sized client, maybe the one that has a net worth of between 2 and 10 million, and the larger client who's over 10 million in net worth. Let's identify sort of a core package of documents. Now we'll draft it individually for each client, but let's identify that core package of documents that let's say a couple is going to need for their estate plan. And so that might be a will, a trust, a durable power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney, and a living will. So those 5 documents for each client. So let's say it's 10 documents. And for the smaller client, it will, probably be less complex. And for the medium client, there might be some additional bells and whistles. And then for the very wealthy client, there might be some additional things that they need to do in order to minimize their exposure to estate taxes or perhaps some income tax problems down the road. And let's figure out, what that might be. And so what I said is, In order to overcome the client's fear of being billed excessively on an hourly basis, let's come up with a system that offers fixed fees. So we did. We came up with a budget for how much time it would take us to prepare each of those sets of documents. And we established a fee that we thought would be fair in the market. And as it turned out, it did give us a tremendous cost advantage to develop this system. And then the second part of the process is let's make sure it gets done timely. So let's set up a system in which we meet with the client, and then before that client leaves, we schedule a second meeting a week later so that we stay on track. And at the second meeting, we present drafts of the documents so the clients can actually see how the plan's going to work in, in English, in black and white on paper. And then before they leave from that second meeting, let's establish a third meeting to get back together and sign those documents. And then perhaps, depending on the size of the client, we might have a fourth meeting to do funding or whatever needs to be done to make them effective. With that approach, also, we would collect half our fee at the first meeting. So the client knows that they have an attorney, and the attorney knows that he has a client. And then at the third meeting, when we sign the documents, we'd collect the second half and we'd be done. And those would be the bills that the clients get. And so they would know with certainty how much things would cost. And so that's the approach that we took. And it kept us on time and on budget. And we've used it successfully for thousands of clients. We've probably prepared, I would guess, in my time in practice between myself and my law partner, we've probably done 3,000 or 4,000 wills and trusts for clients over the years. So that was my identifying a focus strategy for my law firm, and it worked quite well. Uh, and the reason I was able to identify it is I was able to benchmark it against what other law firms did and try to improve on the process. And often identifying competitive advantages requires competitive benchmarking, one of the most powerful tools a manager can use in competitive strategies. And at this point, I'm going to end this. This is the first part of Unit 5, and we'll get into the second part in just a few days. Thanks. Have a great day. Bye bye.